Hey everybody, today we're going to be taking a look at the game's first ever Turn 2 deck. Now, Turn 2 decks didn't become very popular until 2005, where you saw the Jirachi Swoop Teleporter combo enable very strong Stage 1 Pokemon to basically try to overwhelm the opponent before they really got anything set up. Now, the Muk EX deck that I'm going to talk about today, which kind of ironically, was not even discovered in 2004. This deck did not see any play. Nobody really played it at all. It wasn't really until the last couple of years that this deck kind of popped up and started seeing some more play. And it's that's one of the things I find kind of cool about old formats and interesting. And sometimes it's years past the actual format, the decks start coming up and starting to get developed. And it was just something when people were looking at the 2005 format and what performed well there. And then they basically took some of that knowledge from, I guess, future knowledge, and were able to take it and look again at the 2004 format and then find a deck that just went completely unnoticed in 2004. Now, if we look at Muk EX here, Muk is not particularly strong. It's only got 100 hit points, which is sadly just enough to start triggering Desert Ruins. It's weak to Psychic, which isn't great considering Gardevoir is one of the biggest decks in the format. And the attacks are only okay. The first one is 1 Grass for 10, Poison Breath, and the defending Pokemon is now poisoned. Auto Poison is nice, but not a particularly strong attack. And then the second attack is 2 Grass and a Colorless. It hits for 40 damage, plus 10 more damage for each energy in the opponent's retreat cost. So let's say if you're playing against a Dunsparce, for example, Dunsparce has a retreat cost of 1. Slimy Water is going to do 40 damage plus 10 for the Dunsparce's 1 retreat cost, so it's going to hit for 50. Now, what makes Muk EX so strong is the fact that it shuts off all other Pokepowers and Pokebodies in play, as long as Muk is in the active position. Now, what makes that so good in the 2004 format in particular is that decks relied so heavily on Delcatty and Magneton to not only set up, but have a continuous stream of energy. So, not only are you completely shutting off their main draw support, their main consistency support, but you're also shutting off their ability to get back energy cards. And when you're playing in a format where decks are only playing 13 to 14 energy, they're not allowed to draw cards, it's not going to be uncommon for them to start missing energy drops. Now, on top of that, the format is very heavy on energy acceleration. You see cards like Blaziken, Ruby Sapphire, Swampert, Gardevoir, and even Team Magma's Camerupt. And Muk EX is going to shut all those off as well. So while Muk EX might not be the strongest EX, the ability to basically completely shut off the opponent's deck, put them in energy droughts, and make it so they have a hard time setting up is what gives this deck its real strength. And I always kind of like to explain it to people that Muk EX is not a particularly strong deck in its own rights, but it really takes advantage of some of the inconsistencies of the format. So, and I guess before I jump into the deck, let me talk a little bit more about that. The two main ways in the 2004 format is to, I guess, set up is you've got Delcatty Magneton, which Muk EX is going to shut off. You have Copycat to draw huge hands, usually based on your opponent's using Delcatty and Magneton. And Muk EX always plays with a small hand. It's very common you're only going to have 3 to 5 cards in your hand, so they're not going to get huge Copycats off. And the last way is you use Steven's advice to usually draw 5 to 6 cards because you're relying on your opponent to use Dunsparce to set up. They use Strike and Run a couple of times. They've got that nice full bench. Muk EX doesn't do that. Normally, your Steven's advices are only going to be hitting for 2, maybe 3 cards. So not only is it shutting off a lot of the consistency of the format, a lot of the supporter options that players use to set up, Muk EX it doesn't work well against Muk EX. So all of this basically means that your opponent's deck is going to be a lot more inconsistent than what it might be against, let's say, if they were facing a Blaziken deck or facing a Gardevoir deck, for example. So jumping into the deck profile here, we only run 8 Pokemon. 4 Grimer, 4 Muk, The Grimer does not have any sort of special attacks. This is just the strongest one because you have 50 HP, and then you get to hit for that turn 1 10 damage here. Muk EX, play 4 Muk EX. Want to make sure we see him. We're able to draw into it. We want to get this Muk EX out turn 2. Muk EX turn 2 is very strong. Turn 2 Grimer, not so strong. So we want to make sure that we're hitting those Muks. Bad presents aren't going to mess with us. Now, we play 4 Desert Shaman here because we instantly, as soon as possible, either the first or second turn of the game, we want to put our opponent to that low hand size. Just immediately start limiting their options here. Now, on top of that, we do really well with a small hand size. If we've got a Muk EX and a Grass Energy, we're putting pressure on the opponent. And that poison damage is going to add up really, really, really quickly. For Underground Expeditions, you look at the bottom 4 cards of your deck, put 2 of them into your hand, put the other 2 on the bottom of your deck in any order. There's a really interesting, I would say, debate in the community between what's better, Underground Expedition or TV Reporter. And I could probably make an entire video on this, but essentially it's how much TV Reporter, you get 1 additional card, so you end up with 3 cards. Underground Expedition, you get to see 4 cards, but you only get to keep 2. So how much do you value that extra, seeing that extra card? And then there's some other things where multiple Underground Expeditions become a little bit weaker. Because if I go Underground Expedition 1 turn, put 2 into my hand, put 2 back on the bottom, and then I Underground Expedition on the following turn, I'm only seeing 2 new cards. The offside set to that is TV Reporter. You're forced to discard for TV Reporter, which some decks can handle better than other decks, but like I said, I could probably do an entire video just on the comparison between those 2 cards. So I'll keep it brief here. And then we play 4 Professor Oak's Research. You're not going to see this in very many of my 2004 decks, but the reason that I like it in here is because we are trying to keep our opponent to a very small hand size. So if our opponent's most likely going to have a small hand size, it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to get a big copycat off, or we're going to be able to get a big, just copycat off here. 4 energy removal 2, like I talked about before, a lot of decks in the 2014 format are going to run somewhere between 12 and 14 energy. We're shutting off Magneton, which is their main way to make sure they're getting their energy drops every turn, and we're limiting their draw options with before-mentioned problems with Copycat and Steven's Advice. So removing those very precious energies they are able to draw into and getting them out of play is going to really help Muk overwhelm the opponent. 4 copies of Fastball here. Basically reveal cards from the top of your deck till you hit an evolution. We only play Muk EX, so between 4 Muk EX and 4 Fastball, we have 8 outs to get that turn 2 Muk here. It is worth noting that Fastball is going to reveal a majority of your decks, so there's not going to be really keeping any secrets from your opponent, but hopefully everybody watches this video anyway, so they'll know what a turn 2 Muk deck looks like. 3 copies of Steven's Advice. One of the things that I find playing Muk here is that my opponent is very commonly going to want to fill their bench, because they're just going to start slapping stuff down on their bench because they don't want to say, let's say they have a copy of Dunsparce or Rolts or something like that in their hand. They don't want that to get sent back to the deck off Desert Ruins, so they have that chance to draw a dead card off of it. So they're just going to start slapping things on their bench. This makes Steven's Advice incredibly strong, because it's usually going to net you those 5 to 6 cards we talked about. The offside to that is, and usually drawing cards is always good, you do need to be conscientious of the fact if I'm going Steven's Advice and drawing 6 cards and I have this huge hand of 8 or 9 cards, that is leaving my opponent, or is leaving myself open for my opponent to copycat 8 or 9 cards. So just keep that in mind. 3 copies of Team Aqua's Hideout. Now this does a couple of different things. One, it provides us a Desert Ruins counter. And second of all, it adds 10 damage. So to Muk's Slimy Water attack. So what Team Aqua's Hideout does is it says each Pokemon that does not have Team Aqua in its name pays 1 additional colorless energy to retreat. So it's going to add 10 damage for Slimy Water. It's also going to make it very hard for them to manually retreat out of stuff. Retreat out of that poison. So if they do bring something up and we poison breath it, they're going to really feel it if they want to manually retreat out of that poison. 3 copies of Pokemon Reversal. This is, if the opponent's building something up on the bench, we can reversal it up, get that first knockout on it, or first hit on it. Even if they come back and knock us out, just getting that first initial hit on it, start piling that damage up, is going to make it easier for the second or third Muk to finally take it down. 3 copies of Dual Ball here. I only went with 3 copies of Dual Ball because we're automatically going to open with 1 Grimer. And we play through this deck so quickly, it's pretty easy to find additional Grimers and additional Dual Balls. I opted to cut the 4th Dual Ball just to add in a little bit more, a few more tech options. 2 copies of a Ranberry. So the cool thing about a Ranberry is, I guess I shouldn't say cool thing about it. The reason I play a Ranberry is a lot of decks in the format hit for, let's say, 40 to 60 damage. And like we talked about, it's so hard for them to get energy into play. It's so hard for them to build up these attacks. If we can use a Ranberry to heal 20 damage off one of our Pokemon, or off a Muk EX, and then that just gives us 1 additional turn, or they have to use 1 more attack to knock it out. It can just really add a whole nother level of pressure to the opponent. So ideally, the Ranberry, like I said, you play it in situations where that's going to turn a 2-hit knockout into, say, a 3-hit knockout. 2 full heal. One of the biggest problems I found facing this deck is the opponent will use special conditions to try to really get Muk and put Muk in a bad spot. 2 energy is not... It's payable if you need to, but it is a very pricey retreat cost. I found it's very common when an opponent's trying to set up that desperation move is they're going to send up Dunsparce and try to sudden flash, try to get that paralysis flip, and half the time that's going to work. So I wanted a way to get past that, and I tried Switch, I tried Warp Point. Full heal just seemed to be the best option because if they're using Sudden Flash, they're using it to buy that 1 additional turn. And if you're playing against an unlucky opponent where they're able to get a couple Sudden Flash heads on you, then that's going to really get them back into that game. Full heal is just going to, not only are they making a desperation play that you know was not going to pan out for them, but it doesn't give them a free turn to try to get back into the game. I played 2 copies of Full Heal. If you play 1, you're never going to see that 1 copy when you need it. And if you play 2, you're going to hit it, or it's going to be easier to find. 1 copy of Strength Charm. The deck does come up 10 shy in situations. I'm playing around with the Ranberry Strength Charm count. A lot of decks you'll see play a higher Strength Charm count, or Muk EX will play a higher Strength Charm count. I think the Ranberry is incredibly valuable to the deck. It's just kind of finding that right ratio between the Ranberry and the Strength Charm. And then 15 Grass Energy. I do like to play... most of my turn 2 style decks you've seen, I like to play 16 basic Grass Energy just to ensure I get that turn 1 energy. A couple of reasons I dropped it down to 15. One is, like I said, the deck plays through itself very quickly. So if I'm playing my hand down, let's say I'm energy removal 2, fastball, et cetera, dual ball, and then I'm oaking to a new hand, or I'm desert shamaning to a new hand, it's going to be far more likely that I am going to find those energies. Just because of the lower number of cards in the deck. And it's going to be easier for me to draw into those energies over time because I am burning through so many cards in the deck. The other thing is Muk only needs 1 energy to attack. So if you're doing a turn 2 style deck with, say, like a Metacham or a Banette EX or something like that, where it takes 2 energy to attack, that turn 1 energy drop is so much more essential than it is with Muk, where you definitely want your turn 1 energy drop, but if you miss the turn 1 energy drop, you get the turn 2 energy drop, you're still going to have that Poison Breath, you're still going to be putting pressure on the opponent. So, alright, so that goes ahead, wraps up the deck profile from Muk EX. I've been playing a lot of 2004 lately. I think it is absolutely fantastic format. It's vastly underrated, and there's a lot of really fun decks that I think players are overlooking. And I've got a lot of great video ideas that I want to make for 2004. I think there's a lot of rogue decks that people just haven't really been paying a whole lot of attention to, and really haven't done a whole lot of deck building for. So I look forward to bringing those additional videos to you. The last thing I do want to mention here is Toxic Gas, the Pokebody from Muk, shuts off Safeguard. So if you have an opponent that thinks they're going to get really clever with a Wobbuffet or something like that, it's just not going to work at all. So, all right, well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you give Muk EX a try, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.